The summons arrived at dawn, delivered by royal guards whose expressions revealed nothing. After 2 weeks of silence from the palace, I'd started hoping the situation had somehow resolved itself. That hope died when I saw the formal seal on the message cylinder. Dr. Ward, the Queen requires your presence immediately. This is not optional. I dressed quickly in clothing appropriate for palace attendance, my mind racing through possibilities. None of them were good. Ever since the ceremony disaster, every interaction with Varath authority had been tense, careful, loaded with implications I didn't fully understand. The ceremony was supposed to be routine, a diplomatic ritual affirming cooperation between our species. I'd participated in dozens of similar events over 3 years. This one should have been no different. Symbolic gestures, formal words, a celebration afterward with too sweet Varath wine. Instead, the rival faction's sabotage had turned it into a nightmare of unstable energy and biological chaos. The details were still unclear, but the result was undeniable. Something fundamental had changed between Queen Sareth and me. The sovereign bond, which should have remained dormant or at most created a mild empathic connection, had activated fully. I'd spent the 2 weeks since consulting every resource available, trying to understand the implications. The bond was ancient, predating recorded Varath history. It allowed queens to form deep connections with chosen mates, facilitating cooperation and strengthening social structures. But it was supposed to be controlled, deliberate, initiated by the queen herself. This wasn't deliberate. This was an accident triggered by my instinct to protect her when the energy discharge threatened to reach her position. And accidents, as I was learning, had consequences. The palace was even more imposing at dawn, its organic architecture seeming to shift in the early light. Varath buildings were grown rather than built, shaped through biological engineering that made them feel alive. The queen's residence was the masterwork, spiraling towers connected by living bridges, walls that adjusted their opacity based on time of day, everything flowing and elegant. Guards escorted me through corridors I'd walked many times before, but today felt different, heavier. Officials I passed looked at me with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. Whatever was happening, it wasn't secret. The throne room was empty except for Queen Sareth and her closest advisors. She sat rigid on a throne that seemed to embrace her, her skin, which normally held soft golden tones, shifting through darker colors that indicated emotional distress. Her long ears, which swept back from her skull in elegant curves, were pressed flat against her head. That alone told me this was serious. Varath ears were more expressive than human faces, and completely flattened ears meant extreme stress or anger. "Leave us," Sareth commanded, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. The advisors hesitated, clearly they wanted to stay, but a queen's direct order couldn't be refused. They filed out, shooting me looks that ranged from sympathetic to accusatory. When the doors sealed behind them, silence stretched between us. Sareth stared at me with those large, amber eyes that could shift from warmth to ice in seconds. Right now they were ice. "Do you understand what you've done?" she asked finally. "I protected you during the energy discharge. I reacted on instinct. You triggered the sovereign bond, fully activated at depth normally reserved for lifetime mates." Her skin shifted to deeper reds, anger coloring through. "You bound yourself to me without permission, without understanding, without considering consequences." I didn't know that would happen. Nobody explained that protection could trigger. It shouldn't have. She stood abruptly, began pacing with controlled fury. The bond requires intentional activation from both parties. It is sacred, deliberate, chosen. What happened between us was none of those things. "I'm sorry if I'd known. Your apology is insufficient." She stopped pacing, turned to face me directly. "Because your ignorance, your human instinct to protect, has created a situation that neither of us can undo." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Her ears flattened impossibly flatter. and her hands clenched into fists. When she spoke, every word was carefully controlled, like she was holding back something larger. The sovereign bond doesn't just create emotional connection, Dr. Ward. It creates biological compatibility. It rewrites fundamental aspects of genetics to allow. She paused, and her skin shifted through colors I'd never seen before, deep purples mixing with silver, to allow reproduction between bonded pairs. I know the theory, but humans and Verath aren't compatible. Cross-species reproduction is impossible according to every principle you know is wrong. She gestured sharply, and a holographic display materialized showing biological scans I didn't immediately understand. The bond made it possible, made it inevitable apparently, when proximity and certain biological triggers aligned. I stared at the scans, my xenobiology training slowly parsing what I was seeing. Cell structures that were simultaneously human and Verath, development patterns that followed both species templates, hormone markers indicating. No, I said, that's not possible. And yet, her voice cracked slightly on the words. Here we are. You're pregnant, carrying your child, impregnated by a human I barely know, in a biological accident that violates every protocol of royal succession. Her ears twitched with distress. Do you understand now why your apology is insufficient? I couldn't breathe properly. The throne room suddenly felt too small, too warm, reality tilting in ways I couldn't process. How long have you known? The physicians confirmed it 5 days ago. I spent those days consulting with every expert available, hoping for different answers. There are none. She moved closer, and I could see tears gathering in her eyes despite her controlled fury. You have impregnated me, human. Bound me to you through biology I cannot reject. Created a child whose existence will shake both our peoples to their foundations. I didn't mean to. Intent is irrelevant. Result is everything. She was close enough now that I could see her skin's subtle color shifts, could smell the faint floral scent that all Verath carried. And the result is that you have placed me in an impossible position. As queen, my reproduction is political. Alliances depend on carefully planned matches. Succession requires legitimate heirs from approved bloodlines. What are you saying? I am saying that you will not leave this planet, will not contact human authorities without supervision, will not abandon the situation you have created. Her voice dropped lower, dangerous. I am confining you to palace grounds until we resolve this, and make no mistake, resolution is not optional. You're making me a prisoner. I am ensuring you take responsibility. There is a difference. She turned away, her spine rigid. You will have comfortable quarters, access to research materials, medical consultation as needed. But you will not leave until I decide your presence is no longer necessary. Sarith, Queen Sarith, she corrected sharply. We are not on familiar terms, Dr. Ward. We are monarch and subject. I am confining you by royal authority, and you will comply. I wanted to argue, to protest that imprisonment wasn't the answer, that we should be working together to navigate this. But looking at her rigid posture, at her flattened ears and shifting skin colors, I recognized something beneath the anger, terror. She was absolutely terrified. I won't leave, I said quietly. You don't need to confine me. I take responsibility for my part in this, and I'll stay to help however I can. She glanced back, her ears shifting slightly forward, surprise maybe or suspicion. You say that now. When the reality becomes more difficult, when political pressure mounts, humans have short memories for responsibility. Some humans maybe, not me. I cannot trust words, only actions. She moved toward the throne room doors. Guards will escort you to your quarters. You may request research materials, medical equipment, whatever you need, but you will not leave palace grounds without explicit permission. Is that clear? Yes. Good. She paused at the door, not looking back. I did not want this, Dr. Ward. I did not choose you, did not choose this child, did not choose any of this impossibility. But here we are, and I will not let you make it worse by running when consequences become inconvenient. I understand. I doubt that, but you will. She opened the door, guards immediately entering. Escort Doctor Ward to the East Wing quarters. He is a guest of the palace until further notice. Guest, the word was technically accurate and completely misleading. I was a prisoner, however comfortable the cage. As guards led me through corridors toward my confinement, I tried to process what had just happened. In less than 20 minutes, my entire life had shifted. I was bound to an alien queen, responsible for an impossible child, and trapped in a situation with no clear resolution. The quarters they provided were actually beautiful. A suite with living walls that adjusted lighting naturally, furniture that seemed to grow from the floor, and a view of Verath's capital city spreading below in organic spirals. A comfortable prison was still a prison. I sat by the window as dawn broke fully across the alien landscape, and tried to figure out how to navigate an impossible situation with a terrified queen who had every reason to distrust me and a child who shouldn't exist growing between us. The first week of confinement was professionally cordial and personally excruciating. Verath physicians visited daily to document my biological status, checking for changes the bond might have caused. Human doctors consulted remotely through encrypted channels, sworn to secrecy by diplomatic protocols I didn't fully understand. Everyone was deeply concerned. Nobody had useful answers. Cross-species reproduction shouldn't be possible, Dr. Chen repeated during our third consultation. She was my contact at the Human Medical Research Station, brilliant and frustratingly prone to stating the obvious. The genetic incompatibility alone should prevent fertilization, let alone successful development. And yet the scans show a developing fetus with markers from both species. I pulled up the latest Verath medical data on my display. How is this possible? The sovereign bond apparently rewrote fundamental aspects of your genetics, made you compatible in ways that violate everything we understand about reproductive biology. She leaned closer to her screen, squinting at the data. This is simultaneously fascinating and terrifying. I'm living it, trust me, terrifying wins. How is the Queen handling this? I thought about Sareth, whom I'd seen only briefly over the past week. Each encounter was formal, tense, her ears never relaxing from their flattened position of distress. She's furious and scared. I don't blame her. You need to establish better communication. Work together on managing. She barely speaks to me except through intermediaries. I'm lucky to get 5 minutes of direct conversation every few days. Dr. Chen looked sympathetic. For what it's worth, the diplomatic corps is working on your situation. We might be able to negotiate your return. No, the word came out sharper than intended. I'm not leaving her alone with this. Elias, you're essentially a prisoner. I'm taking responsibility. There's a difference. After the consultation ended, I sat in my comfortable cage and wondered if I was being noble or stupid. Probably both. The quarters had research access, so I dove into Verath biology, trying to understand what we were facing. Pregnancy among Verath queens was dangerous. Mortality rates around 15%, higher for first pregnancies. Their physiology wasn't designed for easy reproduction. It was designed for powerful queens who could bear the physical toll of creating genetically superior heirs. Adding human genetics to that equation created variables nobody could predict. I was deep in medical literature when my door chimed, the Verath equivalent of knocking. I opened it expecting a physician or guard, but found Sareth instead. She looked exhausted. Her skin had dulled from its usual golden tones to something closer to gray, and her ears drooped despite her attempt at royal posture. "May I enter?" "Of course, it's your palace." She entered slowly, like the movement cost effort. When she sat in the chair I offered, she seemed to fold into it with relief. "The physicians say I should rest more. Queens typically reduce their duties during pregnancy. I do not have that luxury. Because of the political situation." Because showing weakness invites challenges, and I am weak right now, physically and politically. Her ears flattened further. Your child is making me vulnerable. Our child, I corrected gently. I'm part of this too. She looked at me then, really looked, and something in her expression shifted. You keep saying that, as if you actually believe it. I do believe it. I didn't plan this, but I'm not going to pretend it's not happening or that it's solely your problem. Most males would. Her hand moved unconsciously. She was quiet for a long moment, her ears shifting through positions I couldn't interpret. Then, I need to show you something. Medical scans from yesterday. She activated a holographic display showing the development scans in detail. The fetus was small still, barely defined, but already showing characteristics of both species. The physicians are concerned about several factors. My body is trying to adapt to carrying a hybrid child, but the process is unpredictable. There could be complications neither species is equipped to handle. What kind of complications? Rejection, developmental abnormalities, or, she paused, her voice dropping, complications that threaten my life during delivery. The fear in her voice was unmistakable now, stripped of royal composure. What's the mortality risk? They estimate 20 to 30%, higher than normal Verath pregnancy due to unknown factors from human genetics. My stomach dropped. That's unacceptable. Biology doesn't care about acceptance. This is the reality we face. She closed the display, which is why I needed you to understand. This is not just political inconvenience. This is potentially life-threatening, and I am terrified. I moved to kneel beside her chair, making sure we were eye level. Then we worked together, combine human and Verath medical knowledge, bring in the best specialists from both species, research every option until we reduce those risks. You're not facing this alone. You cannot simply reduce risks through determination. No, but we can through collaboration and careful planning. And I'm not leaving until we've exhausted every option. I took her hand carefully, aware this might be crossing boundaries but unable to stop myself. I made a promise not to abandon this situation. That includes you. Her hand was warmer than human skin, slightly rougher in texture. She didn't pull away. I do not know if I can trust you. That's fair. I'm human, an outsider, and this situation gives me plenty of motivation to run. But I'm asking you to give me the chance to prove I'm worth trusting. And if you fail, if you prove me foolish for trusting, then you'll have every right to hate me. But I don't think that's going to happen. She studied my face like she was trying to read honesty in features too alien for easy interpretation. Finally, her ears lifted slightly from their flattened position, not relaxed but less distressed. I am going to hold you to your promise, Dr. Ward. Please, if we're doing this together, call me Elias. Elias. She tested the name, her accent making it sound slightly different, almost musical. Very well. And you may call me Sareth when we are private. Not Queen, not Your Majesty, just Sareth. Just Sareth, I repeated, smiling slightly. Though there's nothing just about you. Her skin shifted to warmer tones, pleasure, maybe, or embarrassment. You are strange, but perhaps that is acceptable. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Sareth visited my quarters most evenings, usually exhausted from political duties she couldn't escape. We reviewed medical data together, planned strategies for managing the pregnancy, and gradually began talking about things beyond the immediate crisis. I learned about the weight of queenship, about advisors who saw her youth as weakness, about her mother's death 5 years ago that thrust her into leadership before she felt ready. She learned about my family on Earth, about my sister's death that drove me toward xenobiology, about the loneliness of deep space research. We were becoming something like friends, bound by necessity and growing by choice. One evening, about 6 weeks into the pregnancy, Sareth arrived looking more stressed than usual. Her skin was dark with agitation, her ears flat against her skull. Political trouble? I asked, guiding her to sit. Several advisors are demanding I terminate the pregnancy. They claim carrying a hybrid threatens my health unnecessarily, and that ending it would resolve most political complications. My blood ran cold. What did you say? I said no, absolutely not. That this child, however unexpected, is alive and deserving of the chance to develop. Her hands were shaking slightly. But they're not wrong that it would solve problems. Most of my political difficulties would vanish if I simply ended this. But you won't. No, because. She looked at me, her eyes holding something vulnerable, because somewhere between the fear and the anger and the impossibility of this situation, I decided I want this child. Our child, does that make me foolish? It makes you human. I smiled. Sorry, bad phrasing, it makes you real, capable of growth. I am terrified of failing, she admitted quietly. Of being an inadequate mother, of dying during birth and leaving this child without protection, of all the ways this could go wrong. Fear is reasonable. This is terrifying. But you're also the strongest person I know, and if anyone can navigate this impossible situation, it's you. She reached for my hand, the gesture becoming natural between us now. Will you help me? Truly help, not just medically but with everything. Yes, absolutely yes. Her skin shifted to warmer golds and her ears lifted into a more relaxed position. Then perhaps we have a chance. Outside my windows, Varath's sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that didn't exist on Earth. Inside, an alien queen held my hand and trusted me with her fears. And I realized that somewhere in the chaos, I'd started falling in love with her, which was either the best or worst possible complication. Probably both. 2 months into the pregnancy, the political situation deteriorated sharply. A rival queen named Maressa, who had opposed human presence since first contact, made a formal challenge to Sareth's fitness for rule. The grounds: violation of royal protocols around reproduction, compromised judgment through alien influence, and general unworthiness of the throne. Sareth took the news with outward calm, but her ears flattened completely and stayed that way for 3 days. This was inevitable, she told me during one of our evening conversations. We'd taken to sharing meals in my quarters, more private than the formal dining areas, and Sareth could actually relax slightly without constant observation. Maressa has been looking for an opportunity to challenge me for years. I handed her a perfect one. By getting pregnant, I watched her pick at her food, noting she wasn't eating enough again. You didn't choose this, but I chose not to terminate it. And I chose to keep you here, to work with you openly instead of hiding the situation. She set down her utensil. Those were choices, and Maressa will use them to paint me as unfit. How does a challenge work? Ritual combat traditionally, but given my current state. She gestured at her abdomen where a small bump was finally visible. Physical combat is exempted. Instead, it will be political, a contest before the Council of Elders. We both present our cases for who should lead and they decide. When? 3 weeks. Enough time to prepare arguments but not enough to change circumstances. Her ears drooped with exhaustion. I need to prove I can rule effectively despite the scandal. That requires showing strength I do not currently feel. I stood and moved to sit beside her on the curved couch, close enough that our shoulders touched. Then we worked together to prepare. You're brilliant, Sareth. This isn't about actual fitness. You've been an excellent queen. This is about politics, and politics can be navigated. You have such confidence. In you? Absolutely. She leaned against me slightly, the gesture speaking to how tired she was. Sareth normally maintained careful physical distance even in private. Will you help me prepare? I know this is not your area of expertise, but human perspective might be valuable. The elders are interested in maintaining the alliance, and your presence could remind them what we risk by destabilizing leadership. Of course I'll help, whatever you need. We spent the following weeks preparing. Sareth practiced her arguments, refining points about adaptation and strength through flexibility. I provided human perspective, helping her frame the situation in ways that emphasized partnership rather than compromise. During those preparation sessions, I saw her at her most vulnerable and her strongest. She'd cycle between brilliant confidence when the arguments came together and devastating doubt when pregnancy symptoms made concentration difficult. Verath's pregnancy was rough. Morning sickness that wasn't limited to mornings. Fatigue that made even basic tasks exhausting. Mood swings driven by hormones adjusting to support hybrid development. Sarith bore it all while maintaining her public duties, and I developed profound respect for her stubbornness. "Why are you staring?" she asked one afternoon during a preparation session. We were in the palace gardens. She found the growing plants soothing, and I'd been granted permission to accompany her outside the confines of my quarters. "Just thinking about how remarkably stubborn you are." Her ears twitched with amusement. "Is that a compliment?" "Absolutely. Lesser people would have crumbled under this pressure. You're holding an entire nation together while growing an impossible child and preparing to defend your right to rule. That's not just stubborn, it's heroic." "I do not feel heroic. I feel tired and scared and overwhelmed." "Heroes usually do. That's what makes them heroes. They keep going anyway." She stopped walking and turned to face me fully. Her skin was shifting through colors I'd learned to read, golds and soft blues indicating complex emotions. "You look at me very strangely sometimes." "How so?" "Like I am remarkable, like you actually care what happens to me beyond the political or biological necessity." "I do care, very much." The admission felt dangerous but necessary. "I've cared for a while actually, even before the bond, before the pregnancy. I just never acted on it because the boundaries were clear. And now? Now the boundaries are complicated beyond recognition, but my feelings aren't. I care about you, Sarith. As a person, not just as the queen I'm bound to or the mother of my child. You're brilliant and strong and doing your best in an impossible situation, and I stopped, unsure if I should continue. "You," she prompted, her ears tilted forward with complete focus. "I'm falling in love with you. If I'm honest, I've been falling since we started these evening conversations, maybe even before." I held her gaze. "I understand if that complicates things even more, but I thought you should know." She stared at me, her skin cycling through rapid color shifts that indicated intense emotion. "You love me. I'm falling. Not quite there yet, but definitely falling. This is." She paused, searching for words, unexpected. "We barely knew each other before the bond. How can you love someone you barely know?" "I know you now. I've spent hours with you, seen you at your strongest and your most vulnerable. I've watched you lead with compassion, face impossible choices with courage, and refuse to take easy ways out even when they'd solve your problems. How could I not fall in love with that? The bond might be influencing your feelings, creating artificial attachment where none would naturally exist. Maybe, or maybe the bond just pushed us into proximity long enough for real feelings to develop naturally." I reached for her hand. "Does it matter which? The feelings are real either way." She looked down at our joined hands, her long fingers interlaced with my shorter, thicker ones. "I am afraid to trust this, to trust you. I have been betrayed before by those who claim to care." "Then don't trust words, watch my actions. I've stayed when I could have fought for extraction. I've helped without demanding anything in return. I've been here through every difficult moment. That has to count for something." "It does, more than you know." Her ears shifted to a softer position, more open. "I'm also falling, Elias. It terrifies me because I do not know if it is real or just biological imperative, but I feel it regardless." "Then maybe we just accept that it's complicated and see where it goes." "That is not very royal thinking. Queen's plan. We do not see where things go. But you're also a person under the crown. And people sometimes have to embrace uncertainty." She smiled then, genuine, warm, the first time I'd seen her smile in weeks. "You are a terrible influence, making me question everything." "Someone has to. You're too controlled otherwise." She leaned forward slowly, giving me time to pull back if I wanted. I didn't want. Our lips met carefully, experimental, A first kiss between species who weren't entirely certain how kissing worked across biological differences. It worked fine. Different angles, different textures, but the intent was clear and the emotion undeniable. When we separated, her skin was glowing with warm golds and pinks. That was acceptable. Just acceptable. Very acceptable. Her ears did something playful. Perhaps we should research this interaction more thoroughly, for scientific purposes. I'm always interested in thorough research. We kissed again, and for a moment the political pressure and biological complications and impossible circumstances faded. Just two people who'd found something unexpected and precious in the chaos. The moment was interrupted by a guard approaching with careful respect. "Your Majesty, Ambassador Terex requests your presence. It is urgent." Sareth's expression shifted back to queenly composure, though her ears stayed in that softer position. "I must attend to duties, but we will continue this conversation later. I'll be here, not like I can leave." She squeezed my hand once before releasing it. I am beginning to be grateful for that confinement. After she left, I sat in the gardens and tried to process what had just happened. I'd confessed love to an alien queen carrying my child. She'd reciprocated. We'd kissed for the first time. My life had become a romance novel written by someone with a very strange imagination. But watching Sareth walk away, her ears relaxed and her spine a little less rigid, I couldn't bring myself to regret any of it, even the impossible parts. The day of Sareth's challenge arrived with clear skies and political tension thick enough to choke on. The Grand Council chamber was packed with elders from across Varath territories, hundreds of them seated in ascending tiers that made the space feel like an amphitheater. I sat in a section reserved for witnesses, surrounded by guards who made clear I wasn't to interfere unless called upon. Sareth had requested permission for me to testify if needed, a risky move that could either strengthen or destroy her case, depending on how the elders received human input. Maressa entered first, moving with predatory grace. She was older than Sareth, more traditionally imposing, with skin that held darker tones and ears that were longer, more ornate. She looked every bit the powerful queen, and I felt a spike of worry for Sareth, who'd been exhausted just this morning. Then Sareth entered, and my worry eased slightly. She'd chosen formal robes that accommodated her pregnancy without hiding it, making it clear she wouldn't pretend the situation didn't exist. Her ears were in a position I'd learned meant controlled determination, not relaxed, but not flattened either. She looked like a queen, pregnancy and all. The challenge proceedings were formal, ritual-heavy, conducted in Varath with translation devices providing English interpretation. Maressa presented her case first, and it was brutally effective. Queen Sareth has violated sacred protocols around royal reproduction. She has allowed herself to be impregnated by an alien whose genetic compatibility should not exist. She has made decisions based on emotional attachment rather than political wisdom. She is compromised, weakened, unfit to lead. Maressa detailed every political complication the pregnancy had caused, every alliance that had weakened, every traditionalist faction that now opposed Sareth's rule. She painted Sareth as someone who'd let personal desire override duty, who'd chosen an alien over her own people. It was damaging. Several elders were nodding, their ears shifting to positions that indicated agreement. Then Sareth stood to present her defense, and I saw the brilliant leader I'd fallen in love with take control of the chamber. Warlord Maressa speaks of tradition and violation. She speaks of weakness and compromise. But she does not speak of truth. Sareth moved through the chamber with controlled grace, making eye contact with elders, her voice carrying without strain. I did not choose this pregnancy. The sovereign bond activated accidentally during an attack meant to destabilize human Varath relations. Dr. Ward acted to protect me, and the bond responded to that protective instinct. What followed was biological consequence, not personal choice. She paused, letting that sink in. But I have made choices since. I chose to continue the pregnancy despite political pressure to terminate. I chose to work with Dr. Ward instead of treating him as merely a problem to solve. I chose adaptation over tradition when adaptation was required for survival. That is weakness, Marissa interrupted. That is strength, Sarath countered. Strength is facing unprecedented situations with courage. Strength is learning from new information instead of clinging to comfortable certainties. Strength is choosing growth over stagnation. She turned to address the full council. Our people have thrived because we adapt. We learned from other species, incorporated new technologies, evolved our understanding. Rejecting this child isn't wisdom, it's fear disguised as principle, and leaders cannot afford to let fear make our decisions. You carry an alien's child, an elder called out. That threatens Verath genetic integrity. It expands Verath possibility, Sarath responded. This child will be something new, carrying the best of both species. That is not threat, it is potential. And if we reject potential out of fear, we reject the very principles that made our people strong. She was magnificent. Several elders were reconsidering now, their ear positions shifting. Then Sarath did something I didn't expect. She gestured toward me. I request permission to call human testimony. Doctor. Elias Ward can provide perspective on what this situation means from a human standpoint. Marissa objected immediately, but the head elder allowed it. I was called forward, suddenly standing in the center of an alien political chamber with hundreds of eyes focused on me. Dr. Ward, the head elder said, his voice carrying authority across the chamber. Speak honestly about your intentions toward Queen Sarath and the child she carries. I took a breath, centering myself. I didn't plan this any more than Queen Sarath did. The bond activated during a crisis, and neither of us had control over the biological consequences. But I've had 2 months to decide how to respond to those consequences. I looked at Sarath, who was watching with carefully controlled expression. I could have demanded human diplomatic intervention, could have fought for extraction, could have treated this as a biological accident to be managed from a distance. Instead, I chose to stay, to take responsibility, to support Queen Sarath through a situation neither of us wanted but both of us are facing together. Why? Another elder called out. What do you gain from this responsibility? Nothing politically, nothing financially, just. I paused, choosing honesty, the knowledge that I'm not abandoning someone I've come to care about deeply. Queen Sarath is brilliant, courageous, and doing her best in circumstances that would break most leaders. She deserves support, not judgment, and this child, however unexpected, deserves the chance to live. You love her. It wasn't a question, the elder's tone made its statement. Yes, I love her. That wasn't planned either, but it's real regardless. Murmurs spread through the chamber. I just publicly declared love for an alien queen in the middle of a political challenge. Sarath's skin shifted through rapid color changes, surprise, joy, concern all mixing together. The head elder called for order, then announced the elders would deliberate. Sarath and I were ushered to a waiting chamber while they discussed. You did not need to say that, Sarath said as soon as we were private. About loving me, that will complicate things politically. Maybe, but it's true and the elders deserved honesty. I took her hand. Besides, what's one more complication at this point? She laughed, the sound slightly strained. You are ridiculous. You love me anyway. I do. Against all reason and political wisdom, I do. She leaned against me, exhausted from the stress. Whatever they decide, thank you for standing with me. Always. The deliberation took 3 hours. When we were finally called back, my heart was pounding hard enough that I worried it might be audible. The head elder stood, his expression grave. The council has reached a decision. Queen Sarath's actions, while unorthodox, do not represent fundamental unfitness for rule. The pregnancy occurred through no fault of hers, and her choices since demonstrate adaptability and courage rather than weakness. Relief flooded through me. Sarath's ears lifted to full upright position. However, the head elder continued, There are conditions. Dr. Ward's status must be formalized. He cannot remain an uncertain presence. If he is to be father to a royal heir, he must accept formal bonding and the responsibilities that entails. Additionally, protocols must be established for the child's upbringing and status within royal succession. He looked directly at us. Can you accept these conditions? Sarith and I exchanged glances. Formal bonding meant permanent connection, official partnership, binding our lives together in ways that went beyond the accidental bond we already shared. Yes, we said simultaneously. Then Queen Sarith retains her throne. This challenge is dismissed. The chamber erupted in mix of approval and protest, but the decision was final. Sarith remained queen, I would be formally bonded to her, and our impossible child had a chance at life. In the chaos of post-challenge ceremony, Sarith and I managed a moment of privacy in a side chamber. She leaned against me, her whole body shaking with released tension. "We survived," she said. "You survived." I just stood there and declared my love in front of hundreds of political elders. That was remarkably stupid and romantic. She pulled back to look at me. "You understand what formal bonding means. You will be tied to me permanently, to my duties, my obligations, my life as queen. I understand, and I accept it, all of it. Why, this is not the life you chose. You could demand release, return to human territory, live without these complications." I could, but I don't want to. I want this, you, our child, whatever life we build together. It's complicated and messy and definitely not what I planned, but it's real and it's mine and I'm choosing it. Her skin glowed warm colors, and her ears relaxed into their softest position. "You are the strangest human." "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is." She kissed me, deeper than our first kiss, more certain. "It absolutely is." 5 months later, our daughter was born on a morning that turned out remarkably clear, which Verath physicians took as a positive omen. The delivery was complicated. Hybrid biology created unexpected challenges. But Sarith survived with the help of both human and Verath medical teams working together. I held our daughter for the first time and couldn't speak through the overwhelming emotion. She was small, perfect, impossible. Her skin held Sarith's golden tones with undertones of my